So I was in a middle school recently, and before I stepped in, I asked the teacher, "Hey, what are you working on? What's challenging you?" She said, "Ugh, I've been teaching students how to annotate, and they are so resistant." And she did not know what to do, and she definitely needed help. So I walked in to the class with a question already forming. And the question wasn't, are they on task? But what is actually happening when they try to annotate? Students were reading an article that heard her say, okay, we're going to annotate. Every group had folders out, some pencils and highlighters were moving. It looked busy. And then I started to walk over to the group by the door because their text was blank. They were halfway through, no one was annotating or highlighting. So I asked them, okay, hi, I said hi first. Hi. Um, so the teacher recommended that you annotate. How do you do that? And the first student answered and said, oh, you take notes on the side or you highlight. But then the second student helped and he said, important stuff. And I said, well, what do you mean? What makes something important? Third student jumped in and he said, it goes with the questions. So I look at the page above their article where their investigative question was supposed to be. And then I wandered to a couple of other groups, and two of the four groups, blank, no question, which means they were annotating without knowing what they were looking for. So then I went over to another group because they had nearly every line highlighted, and you've seen that. The room looked productive, but it wasn't. And the teacher's working really hard trying to build literacy skills, trying to build students' ability to build their own knowledge through scientific text. And here's the thing, if I had stood by the door and written, students reading an article, teacher circulating, good engagement, I would have left that classroom with nothing that could have actually helped her. So, do you know what you're looking for when you walk into a classroom? Here's what I want you to hear. This is about becoming a genuinely valued visitor. Someone who can see things that are sometimes invisible to a teacher who is managing the whole class or pulling a small group or tending to a student who was absent and just finally arrived, or whatever just happened in the hallway. And here's what most people don't talk about. When you walk into a classroom, your brain as an observer is doing something super complex and it has to happen fast. You're scanning the room. You're filtering what matters from what doesn't. You're deciding where to move, what to listen for, what to ask. And at the same time, you're engaging in formative assessment as learning unfolds in front of you, processing what you're seeing, drawing tentative conclusions, and then checking them just like we ask teachers to do with their students every day. That metacognitive processing. Am I seeing what's actually happening or what I expected to happen? Has to happen in real time, in 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes in the first minute I arrive. Most observers leave classrooms with notes full of what the teacher did. Very few leave with evidence of what the student understood. And that distinction between documenting teaching and actually observing for impact on learning is the whole game. Our second book is subtitled 19 Strategies to Observe for Impact for exactly this reason, because impact isn't visible in what teachers do. Impact is visible in what students know, think, and can do as a result. There are two moves that will immediately change the quality of what you collect in any classroom. One, place yourself where the learning is occurring. Sounds obvious. It's not near the door, not in the chair that they offered you, not at the back of the room, where the learning is, which means where students are doing the work. If partners are reading under the tables, get under that first grade table and sit with the partners. Kids are out in the hallway, get out in the hallway. Two, engage in conversations through questions. Do not run kids through your checklist. What are you doing? What are you learning? Why are you learning it? This is not a poll. We want you to have an actual conversation that lets you hear how a student is thinking and pushes you to find out more when the first answer maybe isn't enough. I was in a fifth grade class last week, and students were in a discussion that I didn't want to interrupt. So I got really close and I listened. And then I looked and I saw talk move sentence frames were printed and laminated on each of the students' desks. So they were discussing, teacher was up front leading the discussion. A typical observer note might say, talk moves available and in use, students engaged in discussion. Here's what I actually collected. About half of the students were using the I think because frame with varying levels of reasoning strength, which is real. That's a genuine strength to name that thinking is being built and kids are practicing expressing that reasoning. But here's what that original note misses entirely. Every time a student shared, they started fresh. And I actually see this a lot. No one was responding to what the person said before them. So the I agree with so and so because, or I disagree with so and so because frame that was on their list, the one that actually builds the conversation, that wasn't being used. So that wasn't happening. Students were taking turns talking, but they were not actually having a discussion. No one was challenging the reasoning of the others. So by reading the talk moves on the desk, the count of students who were using one frame, the listening and scripting of student statements helped me really clearly see why discourse wasn't building. Each student was essentially presenting, making a presentation to the teacher, not actually thinking with each other. And so when you share that kind of evidence, it changes the entire conversation and you're modeling for a teacher how to formatively assess discourse when you're not there. So it's not your students are using talk moves or not. But while half of your students are using the I think because frame, because they're not listening to each other when they share so they can build on each other's responses, that conversation that teacher's really wanting to have happen isn't yet a discussion they can lead. It's just presentations rather than collaborative thinking and really good purposeful discourse. So these are two completely different conversations, but it's because of the evidence. One describes what you saw, and one helps a teacher see their impact. She later said that she had not formally taught them how to listen to each other or to be able to listen and weigh reasoning, um, but definitely could have paused and reminded them to try to build or disagree. We want to engage in professionally grounded observation and feedback, where evidence is tied to something like what we know about how meaningful academic discourse actually develops and tying it to standards of practice for math or for the science and engineering practices. That's a difference between subjective judgment, labeling teachers without evidence, an instructionally grounded analysis, naming what the evidence reveals about student thinking and learning. Our book describes the highest level of this work as conducting an error analysis in the moment. We actually called it metacognition in motion, forming a hypothesis, testing it, adjusting it, all in real time based on our human insight and professional judgment. We ask teachers to do this every day. The teachers who build student ownership are adaptive learning experts. But guess what? So are the observers of those teachers. I moved to a group of students because their text was blank. I immediately made a decision. I asked a question. I got different answers that told me three different things about what they understood. Then I moved after I noticed something on their paper. I checked the page on other people's desks and made a quick decision. This investigative question is the missing piece. I need to see how many groups have it blank. And when I talk to one group and have three different answers, I want to walk around and start to engage with other students to see what their understanding is. Did they know how to highlight? Did they know what it meant to annotate? All of that happened in about 5 minutes. It told me something the teacher was not able to see. They weren't resisting. They didn't know what they were looking for. They also didn't know the difference between highlighting and annotating. They need more explicit teaching on active reading. That's a completely different problem from resistance. It's a gap in instruction, not a gap in motivation. And that distinction changed everything about what happened next and what the teacher could do with this information. Now, when you use an AI observation tool, and we partner with Observe AI because they are genuinely powerful, your tool is acting on your input. When you bring evidence like I described, specific student responses, the blank investigative question, the group with every line of text highlighted, or in the fifth grade lesson where students are using one talk move frame but not building on each other, the AI has something real to work with. The output reflects actual classroom reality as a first draft. But when the input is students were reading and not annotating, or students were sharing ideas, the AI produces, we like to call it polished nothing, or Patrick calls it polished vagueness. It sounds like feedback. It isn't. The quality of the evidence determines the quality of the feedback. That was true long before AI. AI just made the cost of weak evidence faster and harder to recover from. Do you know what you are looking for in a classroom and how to collect it? Here's how to find out. Move. Get away from the door. Get close to where students are working. Listen. Look. Ask. Not, what are you doing? Then I'll tell you if they know the directions. What are you learning by doing this? What makes this important? Why are you learning this? I ask kids, why are you learning this? They tell me, if you want to be an architect. I then continue, do you want to be an architect? And they say no. But I can ask them questions like, what do you do when you're stuck? Start with general questions and then look at their work and start to ask more targeted questions. Tell me more about homeostasis. Listen as conversations evolve and evolve how you are collecting your evidence within the context of the lesson and the task. And then don't accept the first answer when you talk to students. Be aware they may not be used to you in a classroom. Maybe you're not a frequent visitor, or maybe they are just not used to being asked to articulate their thinking to that level. Try to push for the thinking behind it, especially if their first answer is, I'm not sure, because that's where the evidence lives, not in what the students are doing and what they understand about what they're doing. This is not a gotcha. This is how you become the kind of observer a teacher actually wants in their classroom. Not the one who cringes when you go up to a student who's been absent or the one who didn't listen to the directions. You can get better at this. And when you do, teachers will notice. I have had teachers learning how to visit peers follow me as I talk to students and say, can you come do that in my classroom? Every teacher deserves a visitor who can help them think through the things that they can't always see from where they're standing. That is a learnable skill and it is worth learning. If this makes sense to you, and it should, share it with a leader or a coach who is visiting classrooms and wondering why feedback conversations aren't moving practice forward or why a teacher cringes when you come through the door.